Hi, my name's Paul Tilstone from Festive Road, and today I'm in conversation with Ann Dery from S&P Global. Hello, Ann.
Hi, Paul. How are you?
I am very good, thank you. I understand you've just got over a stressful period where you've decided to move from Manhattan or somewhere crazy, or?
Exactly. Yeah. At the end of June, my lease was up, and I decided it was a good time to leave the city under the circumstances, and I moved back to the suburbs in New Jersey.
Very nice. Everybody deserves a little bit of suburbs every now and again.
Yes.
So I hope you enjoy your new accommodation, and thank you for joining us today to talk about your travel program. You'll remember when we interviewed you at the Business Travel Show, we asked you if you could choose one of the components from the managed travel model. Which one have you chosen?
I've chosen engagement again.
Okay. Again, yes, it's a favorite topic of yours. Last time it was engagement and data. And that was obviously pre-COVID. So let's see what you've got to say about engagement. Before we get to that, can you just give us an update on what phase you're at in that return to travel project at S&P Global?
Yes. So since we last spoke, I led a task force of colleagues from different functions, from the people team, global security, IT, legal compliance, and we drafted a framework using the Festive Road framework. And we've actually socialized it with many different senior stakeholder groups now, many different of the working groups, of the return to office working groups. And now it's been approved by the steering committee. Last week, I went before the steering committee twice to walk them through the framework, get their feedback, and then take that feedback, make a few refinements to the framework, and then we presented again last Wednesday, and it was approved.
Okay, excellent. We'll come back to the sort of executive co, and I guess what perspectives there were, and any sort of challenges that you think others might come across, and how to overcome them. But let's go back to the point of engagement. How did you start the process of engagement within your business when it came to devising the framework for your return to travel?
Well, it started with actually the Festive Road framework being posted and published. And I brought that to the attention of my senior management within global business services and procurement. And I said, I know this seems very premature, but we need to start thinking of how we are going to revamp our travel program in light of the pandemic. And, we had worked with Festive Road before as part of our consulting groups. And, my direct management was really very supportive of me contacting all my other colleagues in the different functions I had mentioned earlier and putting together a task force so we could draft the framework. And initially, the framework was much broader. It was about return to travel as it relates to not only business travel, but also personal travel related from working from home in this new remote environment. And slowly, we realized that the people team were working off of pre-existing policies. And they didn't necessarily need a framework. They just needed a reiteration, a communication plan, reminding our employees that you can't just switch countries and work remotely from a different country because there are payroll and tax issues involved. So we kind of disengaged the people team to some regard in building the framework, but we did keep them involved because we needed their feedback as far as how does the business travel framework develop. We had to take into consideration our guiding principles when it comes to how we deal with our people. We're a very employee-centric organization, and we want to make sure that we had their feedback as well. In the end, it was really the head of security and myself who drafted the framework. And then we socialized it with various stakeholders within global business services, security. There are numerous working groups in our organization from each of our business divisions, mapping out their return to the office. So we went before, I think there was 4 or 5 different working groups, gathered all that feedback, and we kept refining the framework with all the commentary that we were receiving. And then finally last week we went to the steering committee.
Okay, and you mentioned return to the office, and I think when we spoke before, you indicated that's in a way that's what triggered the need for this framework. Was it the return to the office in the USA, or was it happening elsewhere within the S&P Global network?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, we are not returning to the office in the USA.
Okay.
In the foreseeable future. I think we'll probably be working in a remote environment in the US until at least the end of the year. It was actually our colleagues in China that triggered this entire discussion, because China reopened about 2 months ago. And as soon as it reopened, they had actually started building out their own framework. And they contacted me to review their framework to see if it met the guidelines of the travel program. And that's when, it was kind of like multiple things happening at the same time. But that was the catalyst. Then it also helped me drive home the point to our management that, we actually need to wrap our heads around a global framework, something that's scalable, something that's standardized, and hopefully automated. And that was not quite the case with the China version, but we did utilize a lot of their foundational work that they had done to build our framework.
Okay, interesting that you had multiple frameworks coming at you, and I take your point. Actually, I've been using the term "return to the office." Actually, it's return to sort of formalised work, full-time work, isn't it? From furlough and all those sorts of components. So it's sort of back to business as usual, but not necessarily the office. Effectively, that's what triggers it.
Right. Because even in China, our offices they're reopened, but we have a scale of, mandatory work from home, then an optional kind of amber color from home, and then we have the yellow work from home. And China is in that yellow/BAU area in the return to office.
Okay.
So we needed a framework, that can deal with each one of our waves. And we're also calling them waves because there are different waves for the returning of the office.
Okay. And talk to me about the balance of responsibility between traveller and the corporation itself. How have you managed each of the parties understanding what their responsibilities are?
Well, the way we've managed that is that we've created an automated pre-trip approval form. So anytime a traveler, an employee, would like to voluntarily request travel, and initially when an office reopens, that travel has to be domestic only. It can be intercity, it could be, from state to state or province to province, but it is domestic only travel. It's a very comprehensive form that they have to go through. And at the bottom of the form, there's a checklist. We want them to kind of take them through the whole experience of traveling within this COVID environment. So we have hyperlinks, all kinds of third-party information like IATA's site, as well as the CDC and the WHO, the WHO, to make sure that travelers understand that this is what the airport experience will be like, the airplane, the hotel, ground transportation, and they have to check off that they've looked at these sites, they understand the environment they're going to, they understand the rule and regulations as far as self-quarantining versus self-monitoring, which is really very important, because even though borders may be open, you may not want to assume responsibility of self-quarantining either once you get into that border or once you return to your home country. So again, we want to make sure that our employees that are volunteering to travel, they understand what this experience may look like. And then at the very end, we have them signing an acknowledgement. Initially, this acknowledgement was drafted more so as a waiver, but then there was confusion about, are we asking the employees to give up their rights, or are we saying the company is not going to protect them, which was never the case. I mean, we're, again, very employee-centric. We care about our well-being of our travelers, but we want to make sure that the traveler acknowledges that they've looked at all these different sites, they understand the experience, and that they are volunteering to travel, that they are not required to do so. No one's required to travel within the organization during the pandemic. And once they check that off, then the form is automatically submitted to the manager, and it goes to the site manager locally. And after the site manager, depending on the type of travel, it may even go back to our operating committee for final approval.
Okay, so it sounds very comprehensive. I guess I've got two questions connected to that. At what stage is it implemented? So is it already in play? And have you had to communicate strongly about the new process? Because it sounds, as I said, very comprehensive. And secondly, have you engaged the suppliers in understanding this process, or actually they're sort of outside of that process? It's an internal process. Once you've got to that point, actually the decision to travel is made, and then it's booked with your supplier as normal.
Right. So it hasn't been communicated yet. We put a little teaser article in our upcoming QC travel newsletter. The first region that will use this new format is going to be China. So we're going to take this very manual framework that they are currently working under, and we're just going to replace it with the more automated framework. There are other countries in Asia that have also reopened, like South Korea and Japan. So we will be doing webinars to do training and communicating, obviously, with them as well. So I'm working with my counterparts in corporate communications in each region. So as those offices reopen, we will start communicating about the new framework, about the pre-trip approval process, and just reminding the travelers that just because you may feel comfortable traveling, it doesn't necessarily mean the company feels comfortable letting you travel. Right? It's a very dynamic situation right now. And, from country to country, day to day, things may change very rapidly. So the company is really quite cautious about letting our employees travel from one destination to another, even if it's just domestic travel and you're going city to city within the same country. I forgot the second part of your question. There was
about whether you've engaged them with your suppliers on this process, or whether they fall outside of the process.
Well, they do fall outside the process, but as soon as we're starting to communicate, I do plan on sharing our framework with our suppliers, because I think it's important that they understand how cautiously we are ramping up our travel. And I've had these one-on-one conversations with many of our preferred suppliers already. And we also wanted to create this kind of trusted preferred supplier list. We've created a PowerPoint that will accompany the communication, in which we have many of the videos that our suppliers have sent us that really demonstrate all these new cleaning protocols and the experience within the airport and what the hotels are doing for contactless entry and exit, as well as ground transportation. So we will involve our suppliers, but they're not necessarily the primary component of the framework.
Okay. Now, talking about, you've gone past the stage where you've taken this to executive committee twice. So anybody that's finalising their plan and about to take it to the executive committee within their organisations, do you have any insights, learnings, lessons from your experience on things they should prepare for?
Yes. So I think the very first thing you should prepare for is that you need to send that framework in advance of the meeting. So I definitely think there's a lot of advanced work that has to happen, a lot of advanced communication. And then once you go before your executive committees, you need to have a very incredibly concise outline of what you're trying to do. Our initial presentation is probably 10 slides long, and we literally brought that down to 3 slides with an appendix, so that we could talk about it very quickly, because you need to leave a lot of time for Q&A, and the Q&A is really quite essential. And it was through the Q&A at the first meeting with the steerco that we realized we needed to refine not only the process, but also the form a bit more. And then we went back to them a couple days later, and it was a much more cordial conversation than we had had 2 days prior.
Okay, so you learned some valuable lessons yourself in the process.
Yeah.
Did you? I mean, I guess it's the art of engagement and communication in order to get the key points across to people who are very busy within the business and need to make some really important decisions based on what you present them. Did you present it as a sort of fait accompli, or was it presented as sort of we're 90% there, we just want your feedback and then we'll finalise it?
It was somewhat presented something in the middle of what you just said. I mean, It was a fait accompli in the sense that we felt comfortable presenting this framework. What we needed, though, was their feedback in regards to, how deployable was it, the timing, who's going to handle the communication. This is a very complicated situation, and up until now, anything related to the pandemic and our work from home environment or the return to the office has been primarily handled by the steering committee and corporations. That being said, I think the framework really needs to be handled and communicated by travel and security, because these two groups thoroughly understand what that experience is going to be like. And I believe we are in a better position to kind of drive home the significance of taking on this kind of responsibility from an employee perspective. It's not that we want to scare people, but we want to be very pragmatic, very realistic, that, for the most part, we have found that 95% of our work can be done in a virtual environment. So if someone is asking to travel because of some unique circumstance, we want to make sure they understand what they're getting themselves into.
I was talking with one of the other interviewers about just how much closer travel and security have started to work together, and that it's not just related to when there's an incident somewhere. It's now a sort of permanent feature. Now that this is approved and you'll start implementing it in China, and of course then you've got the wider rollout, if there's any lessons you learn from rolling out in the Asia region, I guess one of the questions that people might have, if you're ahead of most people in the terms of the stages, is then what's next after this? So, have you thought that far ahead?
Well, we have, but I think what's after this is, first we return to some sort of domestic travel, potentially regional and international travel, but that is probably at least 9 to 12 months down the road. And that's only in case, that will only happen if there's a vaccine, if it's widely distributed. There's so many things that are just unknown at this point in time. Yeah. That we don't really see. When I say we, I mean security myself. We don't really see a back to normal when it comes to travel or even our work environment for about 2 years. Yeah. For about 2 years. I mean, I do believe our offices will continue to reopen as long as each city is in a safe state with the pandemic, or a safe enough state with the pandemic. But the travel aspect is going to take a very long time. There's an issue with consumer confidence, with the employees' confidence in traveling. The company is really quite concerned about allowing our travelers to get back in the skies, so I think it's going to take a while. Okay.
Which seems pretty consistent. I mean, you're also chair of the IATA Travel Manager Advisory Group, and the discussions we've had ongoing, that sort of timescale seems pretty consistent, if not slightly ahead of where IATA are thinking that it might be a little bit further down the line, 2023, 24. But
no, I agree with IATA from that perspective. I don't think anything is the 2019 levels of travel. I really don't see that happening until 2023, 24. Because the other part is that the pandemic has transformed the concept of travel, right? Yes. I mean, we realize and most of our travel, for the most part, is internal meetings, right? We have someone like myself going to see my team in a different country, going to see my stakeholders in a different country. I can do that virtually now. Everybody's comfortable in this virtual environment. Whether or not that's the most effective environment, it's the environment that we've all become accustomed to now. Yes. And I think that will continue for quite a long time. And that there's been a tremendous cost savings. I mean, it's the realism of what's going on.
Any other lessons that you have for any of the other travel managers out there about to go through the process or going through the process? For example, how it's changed your profile within the organization, or any of those sorts of components?
Sure. I think this has been a great opportunity for travel managers to change the profile, to really go deeper into the organization, engage with different stakeholders than they normally would have done. I've always been a very engaged travel manager. My name is known throughout the organization. I do believe in communication and meeting people in person, as well as having dialogue, in a virtual environment or email. But I think we've all learned that, you need to be collaborative and you need to work with the other functions in the organization, because they have a different perspective. They have a very different perspective as it relates to travel. And you are a subject matter expert. And I think this is, that moment that we have to shine, right? That we have to really leverage all this expertise we have. We do need to work in lockstep with security, because, this is now a health issue. This is a global health issue. It's a well-being issue about our employees and our travelers. So, I think that lesson learned is that, feel comfortable to step up. It's a moment for travel managers to step up, where it's putting us in a different environment than we're used to. We're used to operationalizing contracts and worrying about policy. And, if you're in procurement, you're worrying about cost savings and leveraging and negotiating and all that. Not to say that those traditional aspects of procurement and management are not going to still be there. But for the moment, it's really about focusing on well-being and on creating, processes that are you can implement them.
Yeah, I mean, it's an astute observation that it is a moment to shine. But when it is the moment to shine, it's important to get it right, because you're in the eye, everyone's eye. So, but it sounds like you've done a fantastic job getting to the point of executive sign off, getting through that process, and now at the point of implementation. So thank you very much for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you for having me, Paul. I really appreciate it.
No problem at all. So thanks again for joining us. You can find the Permissible Travel Framework on festive-road.com and look out for further interviews in the In Conversation with series. Thanks for joining us.